Stand inside the picture.
Okay, hello.
Say hi, Mike. Students. Say this is emotional and personality development.
This is emotional and personality development
In infancy.
in infancy.
Part 2.
Part 2.
Live and direct from Kitchener, Ontario.
Live and
direct
from Kitchener, Ontario.
Can you stand a little bit more in the camera for a sec?
I can't. I don't know. I'm standing.
This is the same girl as in the picture. 8 years plus later. Alright, next slide. Alright, welcome back to the second part of chapter 4. You're like probably getting sick of my bald head. I've been making you a lot of content lately, but let's get back into it. Let's finish this up. So, ethology is, because I'm about to get into talking about attachment. So before we talk about attachment, we got to take one step back and look at where's this stuff come from, and where's this guy John Bowlby come from, and that's Bowlby, Bolby, and John Bowlby is going to be a big name here, and he's kind of the main person behind attachment theory, and him and Mary Ainsworth, and this, I'm going to have this on the very next slide, but this idea that like there's things that we can learn. It's not like humans are mammals, right? It's not like humans are completely unique in the animal kingdom. It's not like we can't learn from other species. I'm not exactly sure what was in my mind for why I have a picture of an orangutan hugging a dog, but I think I'm trying to symbolize this idea that like, well, why can you like smile and relate to that picture? It's because you can see friendship there, right? Like, you can see that there's like things that obviously those two animals are like feeling safe and enjoying each other's presence. You know, I'm reading a bit obviously into this picture, but basically just saying that there's certain things that we do and certain behaviors that we have because we're physically alive animals, and one of them is how we attach to our parents. All right, that's my weird intro for attachment theory. Welcome. Hope you're doing well. Love you, Nipsing students. You're good people. Again, I sometimes am like, oh, I love you guys, and I know that that's awkward to some people. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm getting older and my health's not perfect. It's like, if I appreciate people, I like to tell them. I didn't really start doing that until I was like in my 40s basically, and I wish I did earlier, but anyways, I don't obviously mean I'm like in love with you. I mean like it's just I appreciate the fact that we can dive into deep topics together. And Mike, can you ever get through a slide just normal? Okay, let's get into attachment theory. I got a hot coffee and the kids are sleeping. You saw my beautiful Evelyn, my oldest. She keeps my hands full, but she's, you know, my favorite thing except my other kid and my wife. Like, it's, kids are awesome. They're a handful, of course, and they're a ton of work, and they make you lose tons of sleep, but like, Hakuna Matata. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here we go. And that is why Mike should not spell. I always like, I don't know why I back myself into those corners. Sometimes I like spell things out loud in recording lectures when I don't need to, and it's like I'm not the greatest speller. So Bowlby obviously has a W. If you took the note based on how I said in the last slide, you'd spell it wrong, and that's my fault. But Bowlby, think of Bowlby as like, he's a little bit more of a biologist. Ainsworth's like one of his students. This is Ainsworth actually is connected with the University of Toronto. Bowlby I don't think is at all, but they were connected. And so think of attachment theory as like the broader umbrella term, right? It means that basically this ability and this need to form relationship is not just something that is like nice if the baby has. It's actually like built in. It's like, so it says there, the need to form an attachment relationship is a genetic characteristic, right? It's like, it's not like genetic characteristic means it's part of the system, it's built in. It's just what you are. You're born with a need to bond to a caregiver, to a mom immediately, and that the attachment, so I'm going to just jump the middle one for a sec. Attachment is this emotional tie that the baby has towards the parent, usually mom. And that attachment is not just emotional, it's also security providing, right? Like a secure attachment. Keep thinking in your mind, secure and security are the same words. It's a safe. Mom's not just mom's just not survival. She's survival in the full sense of the word. It's not like a word. It's not like a baby understands what survival means. All a baby understands is mom takes my anxiety away. And so the attachment from the attachment from baby to mom is this like genetic, super intense attachment. The attachment from mom to baby is, and I know that there's different situations, I'm just trying to keep it simple. The situation from mom to baby is an emotional bond, right? So we call it affectional bond and emotional bond. And there's all kinds of hormonal aspects to that and biochemistry related to that. But attachment is the word used to mean the baby to mom. And then the bond is the word sort of used to mean mom to baby. And both of those are within attachment theory. And then that idea of reactive attachment disorder is just this idea that like some kids that really have difficulty forming attachment, it tends to be very problematic later, right? Like think of just an reactive attachment disorder just literally means like a disorder in how you interact with people that's linked to a reaction to how you didn't form a strong original attachment. Unfortunately, it's kind of a difficult topic, but the idea is that the shift that has, the butterfly effect that has early on is super significant. Okay, so the good news is that the majority of people are able to establish strong relationships. It's like, here's the thing, it's like the magical quote from Freud of like, a good mother fails. It's like, well, what's that mean? What does Freud mean, that like moms are supposed to be bad? It's like, no, it means that like perfectionist isn't the style that's like most associated with success either. It's like then you just create the likelihood of creating an overly stimulated, I'm trying to avoid the word to say that like hyper engaged parenting perfectionism like causes anxiety, but it could certainly exacerbate existing anxiety. It's like when Freud says a good mom fails, what he means is that parenting's hard. And it's not about being perfect, it's about being consistent in the fact that you're providing the two most important things, attention and love. Well, attention, safety, nutrition, and love. Attention, safety, nutrition, and love. That's not a bad combo, right? I was going to say just attention and love, but then if we're being actually serious, you would have to add safety and nutrition for sure. And that's not about the slide. Anyways, I don't know why I'm all of a sudden like, I did that in class the other day. I was doing that in class last Thursday. I was like, dun, dun. I was like all of a sudden like, what am I like? Thinking I'm like into show tunes or something. Like all of a sudden I'm like singing all the weird parts of my present. It's like I can't even sing. It's just I don't even know. Maybe my mood's just improving or something. It's important to look at both sides of the relationship equation, right? Like at the development of both the parents bond to the kid and the kids bond to the parent. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at now. Okay. Let me jot that down. While I recover from my poorly timed sip of coffee. Okay, so the pond between the bond between the parent and the infant right? If we look at them as two people, and we look at them as like how synced they are. So synchronicity means like how much they're sort of on the same page. So like we'll get to this later around like things like breastfeeding, but like this is a big thing, like is the baby needing to be fed and mom keeps trying to rock the baby to sleep, right? Or is mom keep trying to feed the baby but the baby really just needs to be comforted? Because basically excuse me, it's not like it's easy, but basically with the baby it's always like change me, feed me, love me, right? So it's almost always one of those three. Not like it's easy, right? Because I've been there a million times where it's like, okay, the baby's still crying, you've changed them, they've been fed. Like there's a reason why I've probably worn, because our upstairs hallway is like a long hallway and then like a short hallway. So basically like an L. And I've like walked that 900 million times with my two babies over the years, right? And like trying to get them back to sleep. But anyways, I don't know why I got on that rant. So sync is like how much the way you're responding is meeting what they're needing. And what you start to see is people naturally act different around a baby. I just said I wasn't gonna like act stuff out on the last slide, but let's throw that to the wind. So what happens in say you were to come to Kitchener for some reason, right? And you went to the mall, and I happened to just randomly be at the mall with my daughter, and my daughter's 3. It's like, would you come up to my daughter and be like, so what do you think about Harris Trump? No, of course not. That's ridiculous. First of all, if you care too much about that stuff, I would hardcore recommend you find a different hobby for the next month, because that whole topic's going to get dirtier than dirty. Uh, Enough about that. Too much time about that already. My point, though, I shouldn't, those are like such loaded terms, but the idea is just like, you obviously wouldn't do that, right? You're not gonna like bring up politics. You're not gonna bring up something like that. What are you gonna do if you see my kid and you're a normal person? You're probably gonna be like, oh, hi, and you're probably, hey, how's it going? How are you? Nice to see you. And get like, you're probably gonna like physically get lower. You're probably gonna open your shoulders and maybe even your arms. Your tone of voice is gonna definitely drop. This is all if I was like comparing you to yourself 5 minutes before when you're talking to your friend. And the point I'm trying to make here isn't just that like you change how you talk to a baby and everyone's like, yeah, no kidding. My point is that unless you're in like a totally foul mood, like everyone has within them almost this ability to drop into talking to a baby or a kid mode. So much so that it's a mode. It's an instinctive pattern of, or I'm saying there, a distinctive pattern of interactive behaviors and vocal styles that most adults automatically display, right? So in that sentence, the word automatically is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Like, what the heck does automatically mean? Well, it just means that, like, it's somewhere in that difficult world of behavioral genetics. You just know how to do it. The way that, and then there's all kinds of interesting stuff about it, right? When you're like, hey, how are you? You're like really extending the vowels. And whether you know it or not, you're like helping the kid learn to talk. You're basically lengthening out the hard parts of the words. And no one had, this is my point. Sorry, I keep running around in circles around my point. My point is no one had to tell you to do that. No one had to stop you and be like, oh wait, that's Mike's kid over there. Don't bring up advanced politic questions or don't ask them about like what they think about World War II. It's like, you just don't. And it's like, my point is not that that's like, should be super impressive that adults don't ask kids adult questions. The point is that if I was to randomly run into, I think there's like 70 or 80 people in this class. If I was to randomly run into like each of you one by one in a positive situation, right? So let's just, because everybody, that's like the biggest thing about the Samaritan effect experiments have shown, like that's Daniel Goleman, if you want to look that up. But that the biggest effect of like whether or not people are benevolent in situations is how stressed and time pressured they are in the exact moment. And that makes complete sense, really. It's actually what you would predict. Um, that the more stressed out you are and the more under pressure you are, the less likely you are to help someone with anything. Um, let's see if every slide I can talk myself into forgetting where I am. But yeah, I think the so should I fake a segue to the last point? So I think what that means is that the degree of sync between parent and child interaction seems to contribute to cognitive development, which is what I've been saying all along. Okay, next slide. Picture me with my better half, as they say. Um, she hates this picture. This is like a couple. This is actually she says she doesn't like this picture, but she totally made us take this picture. This is after our first baby was born. No, this yeah, this is after our first baby was born. Weird that that made me like question it, but I guess what happened was my wife's one of those crazy people that likes all the royal stuff, and I guess the was it Kate maybe or someone that like had a baby and took a picture coming out of the hospital. So then like her sister Wendy is off camera here, and she's like taking my picture. Anyways, it's at the it's at the emergent. That's in front of the emergency of the what's the name blanking me anyways? Grand River Hospital. KW Hospital, I guess it's called now. So fathers and mothers interact differently with babies, as should be obvious to anyone that's ever been around humans. Babies benefit from both kinds of interaction. Okay, so if you look at this, right, if you can just jot this down, this is an important point. Um, the internal model, like basically, this is trying to answer the question of like what does being a safe base to a kid mean, right? It's like basically the idea of the child confident that the person's there? Are they confident not only that they're there, but they're going to respond in a way that's actually like helping, right? So basically number one is the person available? Is the person going to respond in a way that's actually helpful? And is that response going to be able to provide a safe base, right? And then this happens over and over and over and over and over and over and over. It's like the child starts to learn, is that consistent or is that inconsistent? Can that be trusted? Is this sometimes a safe base and sometimes not? And sometimes, and again, as a parent, you can be a consistent. I'm about to show you like the whole like experiment looking at this, but I want to just make a quick personal point that as a parent, one of the biggest things I've learned is like you're never going to be perfect, but it's the showing up over and over. It's the being there. It's the showing that you're not going anywhere. It's the showing that you're with them in their good and bad moments. That even if you don't necessarily know, like I'm talking more than just when they're babies now, but like even with adults, even with each other, sometimes it's like I've even said that to people before, that I'm not exactly sure what to say, but I'll like sit with them in the hell that they're in the moment. It's like I kind of got really way deep and off topic, but like sometimes it's just about being with the person, and it's like my whole point there was that being a secure home base, I think, is what I want you to think of it as, not of being a perfect parent. It's like what your kid needs is security, attention, love, nutrition. What was the other one I said? Nurturance, let's just say. Right? Because the thing is that by the time the kid's like 4 or 5 is the idea, right? Is that by the time the kid's about 1, they're starting to form this model, and it's like, well, what's a model, right? So if I like showed you like, I don't know, like a model, I can't see it, but I have like, let's make that CD fall. No, like this. I've had this forever. I love this thing. It's like I can't. It's mirrored the camera, so it's like always weird trying to show something, but it's just like a cool dragon statue um that I just have up on this windowsill. But it's obviously not a real. So I think this will work. I'm trying this new idea of like, since that kind of glitched, just so you already have this, right? I'm just gonna finish my point on this last one, this model thing. Remember, I reached for the dragon, and I was gonna make this point before it started. The Matrix started glitching on us there. That that's obviously not a real dragon. That's like a model of a real dragon. So like it's the child has a model of what it thinks a relationship is, and then that starts from like 1, and by the time it's like the kid's like 4 or 5, which is super significant, but because it's basically like saying by the time the kid goes to school, they sort of have an idea in their head of what relationship is, both ways, what they should expect, how to be treated, how they should treat other people, what treating people is, right? Like what treating people, what relating to people, relationship, same thing. What relationship is, that like what does it mean to be in relation to other people, like at the most fundamental conceptual level. What does it mean to exist in a world that there's other people, and how do you interact with those people, how do you relate to those people, and your relationship is like your relation style, right? So you have like different relationships with different people. That's another way of saying you have different styles of interacting patterns with different people. And that the first relationship is so fundamental to the child, because what it's actually doing is it's setting the model that then becomes the operating system for understanding and processing and and engaging future relationships, if that makes sense. All right, this next video I have is like, I don't know, a tad bit boring. Like, you can even fast forward a bit, because like the thing is I can't. I've said this to you before, but whenever I find when I trim videos, that's always when I get like a copyright complaint or something. But so anyways, at the beginning of this video, there's like a kind of long intro, and then it starts the study. I think you could fast forward like about a minute and a half if you want. It just sort of slowly goes over definitions of what attachment means that are like a little bit different than what I gave you, but basically the same idea. And talks about attachment and security and a couple interesting things, right? Like it's fine. And then at the end, you can kind of fast forward a little bit if you want. Uh, Again, in a perfect world, I'm like trimming all that out, but then you get it, you get it, you get it. Okay, next one. So this is classic footage, though. This is like trying to show you this idea of, I can just see in this presentation mode, the next slide's called, like this video is called Measuring Attachment in a Lab. So what are you trying to do in this experiment? What you're trying to do is see if the baby can use mom as a safe place. Can the, and it's like, I think I said this maybe to you before, but like if my child can be over there playing and then come over to me and be upset about something, come over to me and calm down and then go back to playing, then she was able to use me as a safety, right? As a safety sense of security, as a secure attachment.
We'll have you do a brief interaction with some play. Then, in just a few minutes, we'll send you back in. You step in the door.
Everett Waters is studying how far our childhood experiences influence our behavior as adults.
We'll come down to the lab.
Okay.
We'll do this now.
This experiment, which I watched through a two-way mirror, is designed to gauge how secure is the crucial relationship between mother and child.
Okay, this bunny is going to go here, and that bunny will be on top.
The value of the test has been established in studies that would watch a child, 1-year-old, and then follow it up and interview them about the relationships to their parents when they were 21 years old. So we're quite confident in the long-term significance of this relationship.
Peter, that's Peter.
After several minutes' play, the mother is signaled to leave the room.
Sweetie, I'll be back in 1 minute, okay? I'll get you back in 1 minute.
Is it upsetting for you? Shame, I feel. But she'll survive. The key moment in the experiment is the child's reaction to her mother's return.
Hi. Hi. It's okay.
The important clue is whether the baby's able to become calmed down by the contact with the mother, get back to play. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. But you see, when the mother was out, she was only interested in the mother, no interest in the toys. Now she has a contact with the mother. She's beginning to show a little interest in the environment, and shortly she'll be right back with the toys where we started.
So you would call this a secure one?
Yes, yes.
She's certainly much happier.
Now, this is an insecure baby. We get the measure of the baby's play before the separation. When the mother leaves, the baby cries, goes to the door following her. Now, we sent the mother right back in, but the point here is not to distress the baby. We're just trying to challenge it. The baby puts her hands to her face in a sad expression, puts her face down. When she picks her up, she keeps her head down, her arms out, and then she sits in the chair holding the baby. The baby's still sullen. He's low-keyed.
So you would call this insecure
Yes,
attachment?
insecure. He's avoidant. He's not engaging her, and it's not the reunion's not effective. And it's important to remember here that the thing that upset him was her absence. Her return should be the solution to his problem. Now this is another pattern that we see in babies who are not good at using their mother as a secure base at home. This baby is also insecure. But you'll see, we got a look at his play before the separation. The mother's left. And when she returns, she picks him up. He can't calm down. He's still upset. She offers a toy to amuse him or to comfort him or to distract him, and he slaps it away. She offers another. He slaps it away. He's angry. We call these babies resistant or ambivalent because they both want her back and yet can't use the contact. We think that the difficulty is that in the past, when he sought comfort, she's been inconsistent as to whether she's available and responsive or not.
Do you think these really are indications for vulnerability for depression later in life?
I don't think that insecure attachment in infancy is the cause of depression in adulthood. However, when a child learns that he can trust his mother to be available and responsive, he's beginning to learn that you can trust other people, that you can turn to them when you're in trouble. The baby is also taught by the mother, as he gets older, how to understand his emotions, how to construe events that happen to them. You know, every bump in the road is not a disaster. This is a powerful asset when you encounter difficulties in life.
So now when you think of like, okay, classifications, right? So you can think of that as being, well, what's a classification? A classification is, you could basically say, well, there's some relationships between mom and baby that would score like this, some that would score like this, some that would score like this, some that would score like this, and each of those thises is a different classification. And some of the classifications are going to be securely attached, and this is where I want to get back to that same point of like, secure attachment means at its most base that the mom is a secure base, that the mom is someone that the baby can go to find to find respite from their anxiety, to remind them that the world is safe and that they're okay. And that when that hasn't been consistent, they can have these different insecure reactions. So I think it's useful to think of it as it's really just secure or insecure. But when it's insecure, it can be different types of insecure. And so the different types of insecure are because the lack of security can be coming from different sources, right? So a kid that's like more avoidant, you know, is kind of both needing the caregiver and crying for the caregiver, but also kind of avoiding and even resisting and disorganized. And you kind of saw the examples on that last slide, and you can just sort of have this as your note. And then on the next slide, I'm going to talk about sort of what's associated with like the cause of those situations. All right, I'm sorry that I was getting tired in that last present. This is the next night. Sorry, I gotta plan out. Well, the nice thing actually is that you're on your student week or whatever this week, so it actually allows me to catch up a bit. So like this is Monday night, I'm gonna have this recorded, so now chapter 4 will be done, and then tomorrow I'll be able to get the tests like up and the quest thing to you. And then we're basically like caught up, and then I'll be ready for like the next week. And I'm gonna adjust and be a bit flexible or whatever. I don't need to do a whole like update right now, but just to give you the idea that I'm like starting to feel like we're almost caught up. Okay, so now for this part, I want you to think of this idea of like, okay, what is, before I made the comment about origin, right? Origin being where it comes from, and then security being like, is it able to be a safe base? Is baby able to interpret mom as a safe base? And where does that come from? And that comes from like, okay, so first of all, emotional availability, and notice that that's not like just saying availability, it's saying like availability, but also emotionally available, not just physically there. And that the response of the caregiver is contingent. So contingent sort of means depends on, right? So if you say, Mike, what's your favorite number? And I say, I don't know, 7. And you say, Mike, what's your favorite color? And I'm like, blue. And you're like, Mike, what's your favorite kind of chips? And I'm like, oh, there's a stumper. And I'm like, salt and vinegar. And you're like, all those, what I was saying was contingent on the question you were asking, which is, that was not my best freestyled example, but like, contingent responsiveness means when the baby needs to be fed, is mom trying to comfort her back to sleep continually? And when baby needs to be changed, or when baby needs to be loved, like, this is like almost how much the goodness of fit is actually playing out in the responsiveness of the primary caregiver, right? That is the way that caregiver is responding to baby. Kind of, if you use that goodness of fit idea again, kind of behaviorally and emotionally a goodness of fit, being sensitive to the child's cues and responding importantly or appropriately. Well, I'm gonna move the camera a little bit too much. Actually, that's not bad. Okay, so this is a serious topic. So avoidant attachment, think about this as meaning the type of insecurity is based on a lack of that sort of Goldilocks concept I've been talking about at different times, or maybe only a few, maybe just once. But just that, like, I was trying to explain it. It was interesting because it was actually to mostly international students in person at Conestoga like last year, and I had brought up randomly the Goldilocks thing because I do sometimes, because it's just like such a useful metaphor for just the perfect amount. And I realized that some of the students that were unfamiliar with the story. And it's like, it's actually sometimes those old fairy tales, those old stories are so filled with lessons and stuff. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. But it's because I was talking about the Goldilocks idea, right? And it's like, well, think of a baby that gets stressed out easily and mom's way overstimulating. Or think of a baby that really needs the attention and mom's understimulating. It's like, if you switch those two scenarios, it might be a perfect fit. Or those two babies might be to the same mom, right? Because I could have been talking about two siblings there. So it's like, almost like a lack of goodness of fit. It's not that there's not love there, it's that the baby hasn't been able to trust the contingentness, to use the term from before, like how much the needs that they have will be specifically met. And this is even more so with, so actually think of like, because again, these are like, at a certain point, we're just labeling distinctions within the same category, right? We're just saying that like some connections with parents we would describe as secure and some we would describe as not secure or insecure, same thing. And that within those insecures, there's certain different patterns. So there's going to be some overlap, right? So with like resistant, the way to think of that is I used to tell students, I can't find it anymore, but I used to have, I guess I could just get AI to make it. But I used to have a picture of like a person that had two mouths and one mouth was saying yes and one no. And I thought that was always like the perfect way to explain the concept of ambivalence. It's like ambivalence is like you wanting to go to a party because there's someone you like there, but also you not wanting to go there because there's someone that you hate there. And it's like both those pressures at the same time. And so like think about that from the baby. It's like the baby almost is needing mom to calm down, but at the same time doesn't want to trust that. So they're not able to, again, use it as a safe base. It all comes back to like security actually means you feeling secure around me means you feel safer when I'm in your presence. And that, yeah, just that. And then disorganized, see, like, again, this is a difficult thing to talk about because this point is basically saying that, like, when there's trauma in the primary relationship, like the word confusing and disorienting aren't even strong enough words. It's a fundamental upsetting of that idea of what relationship is, right? Like even go back to Freud. Freud thought that like like the root of a lot of stuff was in a lot of the most intense types of what we would now consider mental illness are often early trauma is so devastating to the mind because the mind is almost like precognitive. It's not literally, it's like obviously the brain's working, but it's like almost like pre-processing. It's not processing the same way, so the effect still is negative and emotional and whatever kind of trauma it is, but it's not processed the same way, so the effect is, you know, internalized as anxiety. Basically, I'm not trying to like diagnose stuff here. I'm just sort of trying to build the concept, right? You start to realize that Freud was actually talking about anxiety. He didn't use the words anxiety because that's not the way that people talked at the time. But if they did, he would have used that word all the time. Like he would say neurosis, right? A nervous disorder. Which isn't, I'm not saying that they're the same thing. I'm saying that even if we want to say that that it's outdated language, and that's fine if that's what you want to say, I'm just saying that like the he was battling with that concept is my point. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Now, and this can be in both positive or negative directions, but I'd like you to have to your notes that like significant changes in the relationship can change attachment patterns. Um, Oftentimes it's by Scotty got wanted to get in on the presentation, but I guess sometimes it would be in scenarios where it would be improving it. Um, Unfortunately, it's more likely in the other direction. But the important thing is that like, and not necessarily actually, it's like if just like people can improve, relationships can improve at the most fundamental level. That's true. Bowlby suggests like, so the same Bowlby guy as before John Bowlby, right? This like guy that's sort of branching between biology and psychology in this like kind of field called ethology suggests that by 4 or 5 the child's internalized this attachment pattern, right? So now think of what that means. The way that they attach to people is the way that you attach to people secure, or is it avoidant, resistant, ambivalent, right? So if you just think of what kind of sometimes if you back up and think of the idea for a second, and then the idea that by the time the kid's like 4 or 5, so as I mentioned before, why that's significant is because at that age they're like starting to go to school, and then they're starting to like the theory is then they're starting to impose. The theory is that why this is so deep is because the model of what relationship is so ingrained into the kid's head, our heads when we're that age, when we're the kid, that it becomes the model of relationship through which we understand everything else, right? It's almost like it becomes our lens, and it becomes imposed. Now think of what the word imposed on. That means like it gets put into future relationships, right? So this failure to form this early, and it's almost like the interesting thing is it's like it's interesting to talk about like, well, what's the difference between like attachment and trust? Right? And it's like, because attachment theories at this stage and Erickson's idea of trust are at this stage. And I'm just like 3 minutes into the slide freestyling into this idea, but it's actually kind of interesting, right? Like if you look at how Bowlby and Erickson sort of coexist beside each other and think that that's actually interesting, because what they're sort of saying is that well, like trust would be, because if trust would have a biochemical component too, so it's like the physical, emotional, relational aspect, and then attachment would be the, well, sort of the same thing. It's just like the biophysical aspect of it, just a different aspect of the relationship. But it'd be interesting to see, to put some time into how those two interact. And next slide. Okay, so I've been like rant a lot lately. So I'm gonna keep it though, because you can't be perfect, right? You have to Hakuna Matata a little bit through life. Long-term consequences of attachment quality. Children related or are rated as securely attached to their moms. So think about this. The reason I always like showing you these kind of things, and whenever I want you to remember, like whenever I'm like hitting you with lists like this, keep in mind that they're all things that you're gonna find in the text, right? I'm not just like, I'm sometimes freestyling my examples and stuff, but hopefully you can tell that I'm like basically trying to do as comprehensive like presentations on the PowerPoints as I can, blah 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 blah. You know what's going on here. The reason I like to make this point about like why it affects later, and I say this to my students in Conestoga a lot, is that what makes psychometrics interesting is when they're actually measuring something that has relevance later, that when we see this attachment pattern, we actually see that it results in kids being more social in their behavior towards their friends and their siblings, and being less clingy on teachers and less disruptive in the classroom, and more pro-social behavior, and more empathetic, emotionally mature. That's like a better way sort of, or a different way of saying pro-social behavior. Right, and then on this next slide, I'm going to continue, right, and make the point that not only does this early attachment, and then I went on the rant in the last slide and making the connection between Erickson's concept of trust and saying that like the attachment, you can't separate those two things, because it's both between, it's basically saying that this fundamental first relationship because again, I'm trying to conceptually back up and say, like, it comes back to this word. What's relationship? Or like that we have different styles of relationship, and that we learn the first one, and then that becomes the model, and it affects us in childhood. And I'm going to go on to a part B here in a sec. Right, and then let's put all these points on. Now I should change this. Or you could just change it in your notes. Number 6 is sort of just like a summary point. So I don't know why I have it even listed like this. Or I know I have it listed like that, but 6 should just be a summary point. So, again, kids that score higher in the attachment scores and more secure, more likely to be socially skilled in early years, more likely to be leaders, have higher self-esteem, be more socially competent early in like early, middle, and late adulthood. It affects how they parent, right? So it's that last point that it demonstrates that attachment relationships foundational for future social relationships. That it's like it's when the child is learning how to relate. Okay, I'm going to use that. That's a decent segue. How to relate, right? Relate, relationship. Now that gets to, like, if you want to go deep on that, and don't worry, I'm not going to go on a huge rant, but an interesting psychologist named Melanie Klein went deep into this concept called, I think it was Melanie Klein. Yeah, it was Melanie Klein. Object relation, right? This idea of, at a fundamental level, we're seeing the world as almost our own movie, and we're relating to an object. The object's the world. Yeah, so her theory is called object relation. Like, what does that mean to be a thing in a world? I don't know. She's wild, deep, but she's interesting. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is kind of interesting, right? That, like, as soon as the baby's born, attachment's starting. The baby's, and this is why I was making that point that, like, it's kind of interesting that they're often talked about as two different things, but obviously attachment and trust are aspects of the same issue. But the infants, I'll get past that point. That infants are directing their attachment to human figures, right? Strangers, siblings, parents are equally as likely to get a smile or cry from the infant. You know, it's interesting because then I say they're at around 2 months to 7 months, the baby's starting to get better at distinguishing between people. And I'll just say it like this, like, for new dads, you often hear this thing that, like, a kind of magical moment happens around 6 weeks. And it's true, because around 6 weeks with both my kids is like when there was, or like, you know, it says they're roughly 2 months. There's this, like, moment when they can sort of notice you more, right? Where at the beginning it feels like you're oftentimes just sort of the person that brings them to mom, and then all of a sudden they're like looking at you and you're making them smile. And yeah, in some ways it's like the best thing in the world, right? And then, so anyway, some of that's because they're seeing better, some of that is because of the repetition, some of that's because of your presence over and over. So the attachment usually becomes focused on one person, or, like, again, it depends on the consistency of presence, or it can obviously be both parents. And the baby's starting to distinguish between familiar and not familiar, right? Like family but it's like, you see how family and familiar is almost the same word, but just like, is this person in my group or not? And as their vision's getting better, they're able to distinguish better. By the time that they're like 7 months to 2 years, they're doing, so what this means, where it says like locomotion, Come on, baby, do the locomotion. I shouldn't have said that. That was so stupid. I couldn't resist it. It came into my head. It's like the only time in life you ever hear the word locomotion. But anyways, locomotion basically means like, well, moving to a different location. A location movement. But that's like the baby moving, crawling towards mom, or like pulling on mom's, or like doing things to seek proximity, to seek closeness, seeking contact, actively seeking contact. Phase 4, after 2 years, the children starts to become aware of other people's feelings and goals, and starts to take this more into account, and is starting to like, start to become their own person. It's actually pretty fascinating how all this plays out. Yeah. I just want to read this little piece. Bowlby argued that infants develop their internal working model of attachment, this simple mental model of the caregiver, their relationship to the caregiver, and their self, and how deserving of nurturing care they are. The infant's internal working model of attachment with which the caregiver's influences the child, and later the child's subsequent responses to other people. This eternal model of attachment has also played a pivotal role in the discovery of links between attachment and subsequent emotional understanding, conscious development, and self-concept. So basically saying that like it's important for a lot of these kind of higher cognitive and emotional skill sets. In an extensive longitudinal study, early secure attachment was linked with positive emotional health, high self-esteem, high self-confidence, socially competence, interaction with peers, teachers, counselors, romantic partners. Also, meta-analysis found that secure attachment in infancy was linked to social competence with peers in childhood. Another study revealed that insecure attachment and resistant attachment in childhood is linked to increased likelihood of social anxiety, which is sort of exactly what you would expect. That's all in the note underneath the PowerPoint slide. So, locomotor, locomotor, and cognitive skills are. It says are influenced by social relationships. It's like the baby wants to get over to mom, and to do that, it has to figure out how to get around the thing to get to mom. And it's like, well, that actually involves the thought process of how to problem solve and the movement. So you can see how both of those are tied to the desire to get closer to mom, which is actually like a socially based motive. So this is from just, you don't need to know this, but someone named Ross Thompson. And basically the idea is, I'll just read this. Infants are social emotional beings who show a strong interest in their social world and are motivated to orient themselves towards it and to understand it. As infants develop an ability to crawl, walk, and run, they're able to explore and expand their social world. Right, so it's this idea that like it's so fantastic what a human being is, that it's like the brain's developing and this is all like developing at the same time. This ability to move, this ability to think, this ability to conceptualize self, this ability to take an idea of what relationship is and use that to become a working model of how you understand other people in a world full of complex human beings. It's like, it's cool stuff. Okay. So that picture is just, I just like that picture. Cascade just means like, can I do this? All right. Boom. Anyways, I can't do it with my hand because the way that this does it, it's mirrored and it's backwards. So it looks weird, but I can't show you steps. Oh man, no, I'm not even. I'm gonna just stop trying. So picture how it's like coming across and then down one step and then another step and another step. You can see in the picture, right? So cascades just means it's like steps and it's stages, and it's like the body's going through all these the not just the body, I shouldn't have said, because, well, although that is like the biological part of it, but that all these things are happening at the same time. Biological, cognitive, social, emotional processes are all going on at the same time, and this is all within this like complicated social context. And then there's also, I say there, like, there's also the culture that this is happening in, the specific parent situation that's happening, right? And that's all just like adding to the complexity of the social concept or the social environment of the kid, right? So this idea of developmental cascade, I'll just sit on this for a second in case you're writing it down, is just the cascade just means that, like, you know how in developmental psychology they used to always call it like it's cradle to the grave, and then they used to always call it ages and stages, like at this age this, and we've now kind of as a field moved away from that quite a bit, but that's kind of what that cascade idea means, is like the link to the stages idea. Okay, here's where this is a bit of a tongue twister, but it's like you can think of it like this, that think of in my house, right, that there's me, my wife, and my two kids, Evelyn and Charlotte. And so there's like my relationship with my wife also as an individual dynamic, right? Or not individual, obviously, like a marriage dynamic, but as you'd call it a dyad, right? Two people. And then there's a dyad relationship between me and each of my daughters, and between my wife and each of my daughters, and between my daughters. And then there's a relationship that's sort of unique to me and the two girls when we're together. And then maybe even me, my wife, and one of the girls, and me, my wife, and the other girl, and then my wife, the one girl, my wife, the other girl, and my wife, and both the girls. You start to see that there's like a lot of sub dynamics within the family, and that the development of the child and the parenting situation and the marriage of the parents, and these are all like two-sided arrows. Right? So disequilibrium means like a lack of balance, that it can sometimes, when you start parenting and then all of a sudden you realize that, like, well, all of a sudden there's like a lot more things, right? You have to like kind of decide how you're going to be a parent and how you're going to be a parenting team, and all these other parenting causes disequilibrium. Talk about a loaded 3 words. All right, next slide. So here's my better half. There's your super cool teacher hanging out. When you ask couples like how a baby affected them, it's usually one or the other, right? Like, and oftentimes it brings people much closer together. And I guess if there was a lot of problems, it could make those problems more highlighted. But people almost never will say having a baby made everything the exact same as it was before. That's a pretty rare answer. Being a parent changes people, and well, it's like literally starting to consider yourself as, like, for me personally, I'll just talk for myself personally, it's like considering myself as like Charlotte and Evie's dad. It's like that's a whole other layer to my whatever sense of self, sense of myself, whatever I say it on the slide, yeah. So, and also sense of who me and Julie are, right? Like sense of your, not sense of self, but sense of couple or whatever. Like there's no whatever sense of marriage or whatever words you want to use. And then like that reciprocal socialization thing is just this concept of like kids teach the parent back stuff too. It's like socialization means like making someone a member of the society, right? And the idea is that obviously parents teach their kids, but also that kids teach the parents. Children socialize parents just as parents socialize children. It's bi-directional. That's basically, you can think of bi-directional as just like an arrow with like an arrowhead on both sides, meaning like this person influences this person, but this person also influences this person. Bi-directional. Both. Two directions. I feel like every time I show people this picture, I don't know why, it's my own insecurity. I feel like I need to tell people I'm like 5'11". I feel like this picture makes me look like I'm 2.5 feet tall for some reason. But anyways, that's actually me and my oldest when she was, I don't know, like 2, I guess. And she's 8 now. Yeah, this is just the idea that like the scaffolding idea that like parents uh turn taking with the kid can be important. And it's like I can tell that like it looks like this is almost a controversial slide, but this isn't based on my opinion, right? This is based on what, like, observational behavioral data that's looking at what we tend to see when we observe what mom's doing versus what dad's doing obviously in that kind of a situation. And what we see is that mom's often doing more direct care and dad's often doing more rough and tumble play, and that both of those things are super important to child development. And kids that don't have the nurturing aspect that I'm associating with maternal, and that's always been associated with maternal, struggle heavily emotionally in terms of their interaction with other people and their social confidence. And kids that lack the paternal rough and tumble play, well, plays how kids process anxiety. Okay, so yeah, plays how kids process anxiety. Just to say it again. Okay, so you survived the presentation. I know this has been the longest part B. You guys are actually like, no, chapter 3 is even longer, but you're gonna get a bit of a break, right? Because now you have your reading week, and then you have, anyways, by the time you listen to this, um, it might be a bit closer. But anyways, it's just, there's a couple weeks where we're gonna be doing a bit more project related stuff, so there won't be like the epic PowerPoints as much. But let's just go over these kind of main points, okay? So this is just sort of to prep you for the quiz too. All right, let's go. Number 1, emotion is a feeling or affect that occurs when a person's in a state or an interaction that's important to them. Infants display a number of emotions early in their development, such as crying, smiling, and showing fear. 2 fears that infants develop are stranger anxiety and fear of separation from a caregiver. As infants develop, it's important for them to increase their ability to regulate their emotions. Number 2, temperament is an individual's behavioral style and characteristic way of responding emotionally. Right, so we talked about how it's like kind of a precursor to personality. Chess and Thomas classified infants as easy, difficult, and slow to warm. Kagan proposed that inhibition to the unfamiliar is an important temperament category. Roth and Bates emphasized that, I don't think I actually in the slide, you might want to just add that to your notes, that Roth and Bates are the people related to that concept of effortful control. We definitely talked about effortful control. Goodness of fit can be an important aspect of a child's development. Erickson argued that, yeah, so I guess this is weird because I kind of ended up ranting about it because I must have somehow lost that, taken that slide out, but Yeah, which is characterized by the stage of trust versus mistrust. I'm not sure why I didn't. But anyways, so I think I kind of already long-windedly made this connection, so it's kind of convenient that the point's here. Okay, next. Number 4, the strange situations, a useful tool for examining attachment. This is the video that we watched. Infants differ in how they react to the caregiver leaving and then re-entering the room. Infants show a strong interest in the social world and are motivated to understand it. Infants are more socially sophisticated and insightful at an early age than we previously thought. That's for sure. Okay, a couple more. Number 6, attachment is a close emotional bond between two people. In infancy, contact, comfort, so like basically picking up and cradling and hugging, and trust are important in the development of attachment. Securely attached babies use the caregiver, usually the mother, as a secure base from which to explore their environment. 3 types of insecure attachments are avoidant, resistant, and disorganized. And remember, resistance is sometimes called ambivalent. Caregivers of securely attached babies are more sensitive to the baby's signal and consistently available to meet needs. And not that they're perfect. It's that Goldilocks idea of like we called it contingent responsiveness. That's a good term for it. The transition to parenthood requires considerable adaptation and adjustment. Ain't that the truth? Children socialize parents just as much as parents socialize children. Parents use a wide range of methods to manage and guide their kids' behaviors. In general, mothers tend to spend more time caregiving than fathers do, and fathers tend to do more time with physical, playful interaction. The quality of child care may be uneven, and the child may remain a quality of child care is uneven. Yeah, so it's like it's tough because it's hard to avoid the question of learning in home environments obviously matters significantly, and how do we address it as a society? And this is where psychology sort of starts to meet other fields like maybe social work or some of the other things that you're studying. Oh, you made it to chapter 4. All right, more coming soon. Thanks for being an awesome class, and hang in there and enjoy your week off, and I'll see you soon.